Hello and welcome in, my friends. We have a special treat today. We are going through the podcast episodes for Spells and Scepters. We have an awesome series that's coming out for you guys. Our podcast special is a breakdown episode by episode. However, as we were getting some of the episodes out, some of it got a little jumbled up. So we've went back and saved what we can save, and we're going to release it all, but we've gone back and looked at exactly what we're missing and are going to fill in some of the gaps here in this podcast episode as we break down some of these episodes. So I just want to welcome you guys all in and thank you all for joining us for a very, very special episode of the podcast. We're going to be breaking down everything you would need to get into episode 0 and episode 1 of the podcast. We're going to lay down some heavy, heavy groundwork for the background of the series in this episode. It is your host, Big Blunt Johnson, as always. And we're going to go in and talk about some of the things that you guys would need to have on your mind going into episode 0 and episode 1 of the Spells and Scepters series. Some really awesome things that are going on in the background of the world this whole time. We've been building up to a lot of these things, but they don't really get clarified in each episode as we go. So I've went back, found these things, and we're going to go through each of them here today. Before we can get into that, though, I got to thank our lovely and amazing team for everything they've done on this project to pull it together this far, everything they've done to make it so successful, and everything they've done to keep it on track and to help me stay centered on the project. Just various things that everyone has done. Couldn't even begin to list it all, but Savage has been so phenomenal in getting this series running with his tabletop skills over on Roll20, and Schnur has been so amazing with the notes that she's given us from our session. So thankfully, we were able to go back and look at everything we covered in that session, even if we're missing some of it in these uploaded episodes. So that is pretty cool. And we're going to use both everything we've learned and everything we have down in our notes to put together a little bit better of a breakdown here for you guys. Our episode 0 breakdown was pretty good. It's going to be very, very hard to top that. So instead of going through and breaking down my personal thoughts on characters and interactions, I'm just going to focus on the setting, go into the things I know that I can give you guys information on that we may not have covered in the episode, some things that can really help you get immersed into the setting or even behind the scenes, really, because some of these things that we're going to be talking about are things that um, the team doesn't even know yet. Some of the things of the module that have been kept secret until the very end when we actually go to publish it. So we're going to be going over a lot today. A lot of the setting, a lot of lore setup, and just world building. Some awesome information about the different species that they've chosen to build, which just should set really good with our episode 1 podcast and episode 3, where we had Savage and Cloud. That was just a phenomenal, phenomenal podcast. So hopefully this will set in there good as we get ready to jump into the setting here. Uh, So yeah, as we go in, we crack open the opening pages of the module here. It is beautiful and breathtaking. There is a lot to look at, but as you're able to break through what is all in the module and get past the table of contents, there's a beautiful opening here for you. The world of Nomatica, before the banners and before crowns, before steel learned to fear magic, there was Nomatica, a continent not born of borders but of movement, of wandering caverns, floating sanctums, spells, etched caravans, and cities that rose where ley lines crossed like veins beneath the soil. Magic was not a privilege then. It was air, it was weather, it was language, spoken differently, but every race, every culture, every soul, and for a time, it was enough. The War of Sundering, 200 years ago, Nomatica tore itself apart, not over land, not over gold, but over a single question that still poisons the world to this day. Who deserves magic? One side believed magic was a birthright, wild, dangerous, beautiful, and meant to be guided, not chained. They taught magic that answered will, emotion, and intent. It shaped itself to the caster, not the other way around. There were nomadic orders, spell scholars, spirit callers, and arcanists who wandered rather than ruled. They believed magic flourished when shared. The other side feared what magic had become. They saw cities erased by duels, fields burned by accidents, kings overthrown by apprentices barely old enough to understand the power they wielded. They believed magic should be controlled, restricted, and earned, or destroyed outright. And so began the War of Sundering. When magic fought, for decades the skies burned. Spells clashed like armies, mountains were reshaped, seas boiled, and creatures born of raw arcana were unleashed and never reclaimed. Entire races were caught in the crossfire. The dwarves who forged cities were powered by living ruins vanished with their mountain. Hearts collapsed inwards on themselves. The fair folk, bound to the ley lines, the moonlight faded as the magic singing them fractured. Some say, still to this day, trapped between the moments, unable to return. Even humanity was nearly lost. And then, silence. Both sides were shattered, both armies annihilated, one another so completely that history itself fractured. The war did not end with victory, it ended with exhaustion. And therein lie the survivors. From ashes, only a handful remained. Some were survivors who looked upon the ruin and swore never again. They gathered in secret and studied what went wrong, vowed to teach magic carefully, slowly, guided by wisdom rather than ambition. From them would arise Mistvale Sanctum, not a kingdom, not an empire, a school, floating, hidden, watched by ancient wards, a place where magic would be studied as both gift and responsibility. But not all survivors chose restraint. Others walked away from the war convinced of a darker truth. They preached that magic was a sin, that it corrupted the unworthy, and that only chosen few, if any, should ever wield it again. These survivors became fanatics, spread fear through sermons, through whispered warnings, through blood-stained examples. They taught that magic was the reason the world burned, that the world would only heal once magic was gone. The world outside of Mistvale is not a world without spells, but a world without magic. In the centuries that followed, Nomadica changed. Magic did not vanish, but it withdrew. Where once armies marched behind spellcasters and living constructs, now they marched behind steel. Swords replaced staves, shields replaced sigils, training replaced talent. Kingdoms rose not through arcane might, but through discipline, numbers, and bloodshed. Gold replaced knowledge, conquest replaced wonder. Magic users became rare, then hunted, and then myth. Monsters once checked by wards and roaming mages now roam freely, striking villages, feasting, and then vanishing back into forests. The ruins to attack multiply unchecked. Entire species have faded from the world's memory. Children grew up believing magic is either a lie or a curse, and thus paved way for the rise of the Legion. The kingdom of the Legion. From this new age of steel arose a single power strong enough to reshape the continent. Aurelion, the guided kingdom. Aurelion does not promise alignment, it promises safety. Its banners shine gold and white, its roads are clean, its cities are protected by towering walls and an army unlike any the world has seen in generation, the Legion of the Crown. Knights trained from childhood, disciplined beyond fear, armed and enchanted steel, not spellcasting, relics salvaged from ruins of the old world, and where the legion marches, monsters fall, bandits vanish, and rebellions end. And magic? Magic is regulated. Those who wield it without sanction are criminals, and those who teach it freely are traitors. Those who hide it are hunted. The Legion claims this is mercy. The world is not so sure. Between these two diffractions lie in the middle, somewhere like a valley between two big hills, Mistvale watches, waits. Far above the world, hidden by a cloud, veil, and ancient enchantment, Mistvale's sanctum still floats. Its halls are quieter now, its students fewer, its teachers older. They know the truth that history forgot. That magic did not destroy the world alone. Fear did. Mistvale does not seek to rule, it seeks to prepare, because something stirs again. Ley lines hum louder than they have in centuries. Creatures once thought to be extinct are returning, changed, twisted, hungrier. Old names resurface in forbidden text, and somewhere between the kingdoms of steel and the fanatics of fear, new souls are awakening to magic for the first time, untrained, unprotected, unaware of the cost. The question that remains: Pneumatica stands at a crossroads once more, a world guarded by swords, a truth written in spells, a history that proves neither path is clean. So the question returns, older than crowns and sharper than blades, should magic belong to everyone or to no one at all? The answer will not come from kings. It will come from those brave or foolish enough to wield power in a world that no longer understands it. And this time, the world may not survive that answer. And that gives us the opening for the module. Like I said, it is beautiful. It is insanely well written. Probably one of my most hyped up parts about the module is this intro that it brings us into this world, because there's just so much context there. I mean, you just get this insane dump right off the bat that makes so many more things make sense. Um, Especially going into the first couple episodes, episode 2 and episode 3 specifically. Episode 0 and episode 1 are mainly, of course, what we're mainly here to talk about, but this just gives so much further context to the things that happen down the line in episode 2 and episode 3. But really, really gives us some beautiful insight into episode 1, or episode 2, Crossroads of Destiny, as not only is that whole episode kind of showing us these same thematic scenes, that like everything is aligning to this question of how powerful is magic, and like the dangers of learning it, and not just having it, but what it does to you, what you become with the more power that you're able to obtain. And it kind of sets up even crazier with this war that we know is, even like, this is the only thing that we know of to this point that is older than Mistvale, and we hadn't really thought that Mistvale was that old, around, like 100 years, 150 years. So this really starts putting some things farther back in the history of the world than just the start of this sanctum. And it's cool because it's something that you get so early on in the module. You get it right up front, which is just fucking awesome. It's fantastic that it opens in such a strong, dynamic way that you're immediately sunk into this world of the back and forth between these two questions that they're having. And of course, we find out that Mistvale isn't really like necessarily the good guys, but they're kind of like in the middle. They're just here to let you discover it, let you basically practice it and learn it in a safe place where you're not being hunted. And then we get this context that, yeah, the people that can do magic are going to be essentially so valuable to one of these two sides that they're going to need them. They're going to hunt them. And that just gives us so much context and lore looking back at episode 2, Crossroads of Destiny, when Heimdall is really, really trying to usher the fact in that they need to leave and get out of there before dark, essentially, because this is such a popular trade route that if they are spotted, the closer to dark it gets, the more suspicious it is going to be, and so the more attention it is going to draw. Again, just love how much this ties in. And it gives us a lot of setup about the Legion, because we haven't really got anything from them, and we don't really get too much from them in this whole module. Like, they're kind of the most reclusive group that we're going to get to know about besides the elves. Like, I think the elves are mentioned just slightly even less. But it's just still so crazy because, again, it's right here. It's in the first couple pages right after you get past the table of contents. And it is just amazing. It is probably one of the best pieces of lore fiction I think I've ever wrote, because it is just so clean. It ties in so well to the next piece, which we're not going to go over all of them, of course, but there is something different for each of the species. And of course, we have even more species that are coming with our vote last Sunday, where we actually didn't even get to host the vote, but we had it brought up that there's going to be a vote for the new species that are coming out. One new species is guaranteed to be dropping, but we just don't know what it is. And one we're going to be able to vote for, which is out of 4 that we got rumored are going to possibly be included. And that was dwarf, orc, harpy, and something else. It was something weird. Can't remember what the other one that was potential to be voted for was, but dwarf, orc, and harpy for sure. Oh, my brain. What was it? Looks so bad on a podcast to not know what you're talking about. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of them. There was like 4 new species that are coming and like 4 new classes. So it's a lot of information in all of them to keep straight. But so we're not gonna have time to break into all of them, but we do get something interesting and beautiful for each of the ones that we do have so far. And it just follows this intro piece as you're getting the Mistvale lore, or what's called as the Nomatica lore. It's just the entire continent. But after you get through that, you get into each of the individual species before you have to, of course, pick your own species and start building your character and stuff. And I think it's really cool. So we're going to go through each of the ones that our cast and crew has picked. And so of those, we're going to probably, we're going to do Shadow Veiled, Moonfolk, and the Fae, probably. Okay. Shadow Veiled. The heirs to the dead empire. Shadow Veiled are the last echoes of the Dark Elves, a people erased during the War of Sundering. When the war reached its most desperate hour, the Dark Elves turned inwards, binding Shadow not as a weapon but as a refuge. Their cities vanished, their banners burned, and their names were struck from history. What survived were not elves, but descendants, shadow veiled, are born touched by that final spell, skin marked by dusk tones, eyes that reflect low light, and magic that hums quietly even when uncast. They are not inherently evil, but the world does not remember nuance. Too many, a shadow veiled child is a living curse. Old superstitions claim that their presence bends fate and that their magic attracts calamity, that another war would follow if they were ever allowed to rise again. Kingdoms tolerate them, rarely trust them, and often watch them closely. The shadow veiled, known for this fear, well, some hide their heritage, some lean into it, and all carry the weight of a civilization that died so the world could survive. Then we got the Moonfolk. Moonfolk are really, really sick. Shadow Veiled are awesome because we just get so much like crazy lore that is like actually legit. So much of what we get from the book is theory. Like a lot of it is just open context for your DM to take and use in their world as they build and expand it. So much of it is meant to be open theory, but the Shadow Veiled, we get this solid confirmed history of what actually happened to him, which was like a huge talk in one of the podcast episodes. Um, so that's so cool to be able to get the answer that so many people were wondering and like pondering back and forth right here, definitively talked about. It does not, of course, give you actually what happened, but it does tell you that there was a spell that was used in this process, and it was essentially what sealed the deal for them. What makes the Shadow Veiled have this emanating shadow that is leaking out of them. And then the Moonfolk, we get, of course, back to that more in theory, but it is also just such a beautiful description for the Moonfolk. Moonfolk, children of the first song. Moonfolk do not claim descendants from kings or gods, but from a spirit. Long time before they had direction, before land or sea knew their names, there was a moon spirit, wandering the emptiness, loneliness it had sang, not to command, but to be heard. And the sun listened. Entranced by the song, the sun grew still, and in that stillness reality formed. Stars fixed themselves, orbits took shape, and time learned to flow forward. When the song ended, the moon spirit fractured, and its essence becoming the first of the moonfolk. Moonfolk carries echo of that ancient harmony. Their voices hold strange power, and their magic often manifests through rhythm, emotion, and a celestial alignment. They feel tides where others feel weather, and time where others feel age. Many believe the moonfolk exist to remember, to ensure the sun never forgets how fragile stillness can be. Others fear them, whispering that if the moonfolk ever sung together again, the world might pause once more. And I think this is also beautiful because it starts laying a little bit of the culture and beliefs of the world down. And again, this is like right first second. We're actually on page 5 here, but we're like 5, almost 6 pages in, and we're getting just so much context from the opening, giving us all of the Nomatica lore, giving us the what has divided the continent, why is it in so many separate kingdoms, and giving us how essentially these two sides formed of the beliefs of magic, and of course the middle side, which is Mistvale, kind of sitting here in this neutral ground where it's like, yeah, we should just like teach people, but we should teach them how to control their magic. And then the Shadow Veil, again, their backstory gives us this proof that there is some sort of power and curse and magic and all in the same. Something to be feared for sure. But the Moonfolks gives us the opposite. It gives us curiosity and mystery, hope, and allure that this magical presence is somewhat stronger. And of course, it's written to be so far fetched, so far into fairy tale land that it is not actually believed to be possible by the majority of the races and species. Like only the moon folk would believe this to be their true uh, coming. And I just think that it's so awesome. And then we get the Fae. The Fae, the children who remained. The Fae are not fairies. They are what came after. And when fairy folk vanished, whether fleeing, ascending, or being torn from the material plane, something was left behind. A residue of whimsy, emotion, a wild magic seeped into this world. From that residue, the Fae were born. They are less radiant than their ancestors, less eternal, but more grounded. Fae feel joy and grief intensely. They bond deeply to places and people and moments. Where fairies danced above the world, the Fae live within it. No one knows where the fairies went. Some believe they abandoned the world after the war. Others believe they were consumed protecting it. A few claim that Fae themselves are proof that fairies still watch, unable to return. Since their disappearance from the material plane, the veil has grown quieter, less vibrant, and less forgiving. The Fae feel that loss instinctively like a song missing its final note. And I guess the Fae gives us a nice, even middle ground in between this out there kind of whimsy and the darker core, like actual truth of magic in this world. And between the two, which is, of course, the Shadow Veil's background and the Moonfolk's background, we get this actual kind of centered reality that is an even bigger mystery, honestly. Which I love is that each of these is supposed to give you just enough that you would get an idea of the species itself, but still leave you with so many questions that it makes you want to play one of those to have the chance to figure out those answers for yourself. And I think that's something that all of them really do well, but the Fae exceptionally well here in their breakdown. Um, and I'm even going to give you guys a special one from one of the ones that we, of course, don't have done yet, but I have it drafted up over here in the side somewhere. And should be having a vote for these coming up very soon for which species was actually going to get added. I'm leaning very heavily towards the orcs right now. Um, all these species do actually exist in the module already, they're just not playable. So all we have to do is kind of bend it around a little bit to make some of them playable, and of course add these uh, character panels or species panels for them. And so we have all of them done ahead of time, so when the vote comes, we're ready to basically add these in. But I'm going to go ahead and read you guys the orc just because it's pretty cool as well. The orcs. Born of war, reforged by time, the orcs were not born, they were made. Long ago, in the darkest hours of a war of sundering, foul magic was used to craft living weapons, creatures bred for strength, endurance, and obedience. The first orcs knew only battle, but when war ended, the orcs remained. Over generations, they changed. They learned language, memory, choice. Orcs formed families. They built traditions. They began to bury their dead instead of abandoning them. And in time, they became people. The world, however, did not change with them. Many still believe orcs are an insult to the natural order, that storms, plagues, and bad fortune follow wherever orcs gather. Kingdoms often blame orcs for disasters simply because it is easy. Orcs know the truth. They were born from darkness, but they are not bound to it. Every orc life is an act of defiance against the purpose they were created for. And I think this is just also so beautiful because it sets players up to take orc in a different way than it's ever been presented in high fantasy before. Of course, you still have this agency of the orc being like a war machine and being like a monster, but in this era that we're getting introduced to him, and I think there was a small typo there because it's definitely supposed to say before, not during the late hours. Um, when they would have been created, this also is supposed to highlight that there is even more going on before the war, like things that would have built up to this tension happening, to this war coming to a head, into it, evolving into an actual battle and an actual fight. And I think one of the things that would have brought this to a head would have been the creation of orcs. Much like steelkin or stonekin and various other constructs, the orcs are really, really close to walking that line upon being unnatural magic. And like actually not even just unnatural, but going against the laws of magic, going against the laws of nature. I think the orcs set up this tension that would have been built a long time ago before they would have had the ability to make the things that they can make now, like artificers and these advanced constructs. One of the first attempts would have probably been something along the lines of orcs, and seeing in its effectiveness as it is now like one of the main classes, even back then, seeing that it would have been so effective, they would have taken this and it would have spread very, very rapidly. And I feel like this being something that would have people questioning the efficacy of having these creatures and creating these creatures and obstructing the natural order would actually be one of the things that would build the tension of this war to a head. Now that we've talked Shadow Vale and Moonfolk and Fae and Orcs, and we've even went in and talked the foundations of the world and this fracture that has happened, this war that has created two different sides to this opinion, and even the neutral side that sits in the middle. With this being said, it would not make sense to not go on to talk about the veil and the balance. In Nomatica, in Spells and Scepters, there is a balance that has to be maintained, a natural order, so to speak, of life, death, space, time, fate, destiny. However you want to think about it, it is all bridged out upon the idea that in the actual world, as the players go and get stronger and stronger and stronger, there needs to be a reason why there's getting more and more stronger and stronger and stronger monsters, so that the idea of the novel and everything can continue as forward, and so that it's not seeming like everything is actually just bending around the players. There has to be a reason for it. And that reason that we've come up with is this balance of natural order. So we have the material plane, which is just like one dimension, one space, and then we have all these other, 30 or so planes that are in existence messing with the natural plane. And each of those is a tangent to that magic itself, such as fire, water, etc., 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 necromancy, blood, moon, sun, each of them coming from this different space entirely, as the moon and sun are actually physically in space, occupying different spaces. And that balance, the balance between it, what keeps it low level, is that there's a veil, a magical, uh, almost imaginary veil that sits in between reality and the aether, which is basically the thin. If reality is on this side of the door, then the veil is the door itself, and the aether is the doorway that the door sits in, holding it basically in place. Our imagination, so to speak, how we believe it should be. So this veiled construct we call the natural order. And in Spells and Scepters, that natural order is maintained by there being an equal amount of power on this side and an equal amount of power on that side that is flowing from there to here. And this is the actual process of natural order. This creates energy, which creates life, which eventually dies, destroys, goes back to that side, and then comes more energy that comes back over here. And so the cycle of life and death and the natural order repeats. Well, since there are so many of these planes of energy that we've created, there's like 32 of them. There has to be an equal amount of things over here to tie those ideas to. So we got like the ley lines, which are basically all of it's like a giant spider web of lines connecting all these things together, even though every single idea hasn't been placed down on the board just yet. A lot of it has been kind of soft thought out and felt through. Um, Such as we know these um, waste stones, the ability to like teleport in between these different areas, is actually m- one of these magical properties. But we actually got into it in one of the podcasts with Cloud, talking about uh, the waystones and keystones, which are essentially like a lock and key, so to speak. So if less objects were to be present and more flow had to go through them, you would need a key to essentially open them. So there's the waystones, which are the physical spot, and then you have the keystone, which is an item or a person that represents that connection of power. And most of these would not be like, even if it's a person, so to speak, it wouldn't be like an actual person in the world, rather a fantastical beast that exists somewhere in the world that is maintaining that huge amount of that type of magic. So we got into the example of like the giant spider that would potentially live in the forest of Nightfen, and it actually being something that helps keep this natural flow of magic sustained by being a keystone, by being just such a large source of this magic. Um, and how many more of those there could be, items, people, places, or not places because those are the waystones, but essentially these are all mapped out by the ley lines, and these ley lines connect all of the waystones together. This process mimics this like drawn out map, mimics the cycle that the natural order has to follow by flowing through each of these points. Um, and I think we can't really go too far into it just yet, but what we can say is that the main overarching goal of this natural order is to keep life on this side of the plane and to keep death on that side of the plane. The veil keeping the two separated. That is essentially the goal of this. Um, and we know that one of these fanatic groups from an episode that we get into a little bit later on down the line, Arrest in Riverwood, where we actually get to see one of these fanatic groups that they are essentially like uh not not in the right, but trying to protect this natural order by making sure no more Shadow Veil are around to develop their ability and to curate this ability to step behind the veil and essentially mess with that natural order even further. And then we also see it become uh relevant in um when trying to think of what the episode was now because we chopped it up, but I think, yeah, 6, I want to say it was episode 6, A Duel at Midnight, when Vero is having this back and forth with this mystery figure that has appeared, and he is essentially telling Vero that, you know, if you are to continue this path, you're continue to try and manifest your abilities here on unsanctioned ground, it is going to rip a hole in the veil, and you're going to put like all of these people at risk. And asking him if he really thinks he can control that, because the other side is that you're not gambling with your own life, you'd essentially be gambling with everyone's life around you. And so when he's having this back and forth with him, the main point that he's leaning on is that even if you are powerful, power is what would be the problem. Power is what would rip this veil apart, especially the power that you specifically are manifesting, that we know all of the shadow veil can manifest. Uh, and so it's some pretty cool insight when you start tying together all of these theories that we've essentially put out there. This is mostly all theoretical, except the fact that I'm sitting here explaining it to you guys now. But in the world itself, it is mostly believed to be theoretical. Um, so yeah, when they're having this argument back and forth, it is mostly hinging upon the fact that of course he knows you're powerful, but he's building up more and more power, and that is actually the problem. Because the more power a Shadow Veil is able to claim, the more abilities they're able to do, the more they're able to get behind the veil, the more they're able to disturb that natural order and flow, the more they're able to break it. This is a really cool reflection, because we know that there is this maybe not veiled issue, or we just know that he's on some sort of plane of existence that isn't our own, which is Vork's dad, or Vero's dad, Vorks, who is some sort of greater evil, and is essentially locked away on some other plane, so that we know. And we could assume that it's maybe coming from somewhere along the same lines of them being like, yeah, we can't be just like ripping open giant holes in the veil and letting all these monsters and shit come through. Which is also something that we don't know if this is a new thing that is popping up across Nomatica, as the Shadow Veil themselves are not very old. Like, as a species, they are one of the newer species uh, in the grand scheme of how long the world's been. And the Shadow Veil themselves have not been around for very long, so it raises the question that if this hate for them is new, or if this is a new understanding that people seem to have, or how back it would actually go. Would this same prejudice and same hate track all the way back to their ancestors? Would it go as far back to the Dark Elves? Would it go back as far to this War of Sundering? Would it go back to before the War of Sundering? Would it be one of the reasons that this tension started to build up? Would it be the reason other wizards were making orcs? Um, because another cool thing about the orcs is how, again, their species description there gives you some pretty cool background and stuff, but what you don't figure out is until later, of course, they're resistant against a lot of shit, and all of it is magical. Especially dark magic. And in the species description, of course, it breaks it down and gives you a whole bunch of different hints, but they essentially come from dark magic and have spent however many years of existence they've been in turning away from it, fighting against it, trying to become something different as they become sentient, as they become more intelligent and human-like and sophisticated and civilized, as they burden themselves against this magic, to fight against it, to turn away. And so that is something that's really cool, because if you track it back, maybe it could mean that since we know they have all these resistances and they were built just before this war essentially kicked off and came to this giant head, you could track it back to think that maybe they were building them to be resistant against dark magics like that the dark elves would have. And so it kind of builds in some built-in bad blood against the two species, but I guess that's only if you're able to track it back that far and keep up with that theory that the orcs were built for this war, because we know that the war would have happened with or without the orcs, essentially. It was bound to happen, as it wasn't fought over the species itself, it was fought over the idea of, like, who, if we're just gonna be having everybody have magic, there's gotta be, like, regulations to magic, and then another group's like, "Nah, you can't regulate magic," and then it just goes crazy. Um, but yeah, maybe this could have been one of the reasons they created orcs, and all the other wizards are like, "Hey, yo, I don't know if we should be doing that with magic," and it snowballed. But it definitely creates some lore tension between the orcs and the dark elves, as both of them are essentially coming from this past, coming from this war, and both of them are trying to get away from it. I love the duality between those two. Um, Anyways, yeah, that is all the character breakdown we are going to do, because we are rolling through here. Now we are going to jump back over to our transcripts that we have here, provided by our awesome note taker duo, Cloud and Wax, Jimbo and Schner. And yeah, we're gonna try something a little bit different here, as we haven't really gotten to use these very much for purposes like so. We're gonna go ahead and pull up the note transcript from episode 0, and we're gonna crack into it with a live recapping here on the podcast. So we opened it up. Everybody got a chance to introduce themselves. We met Savage, which was Vero; Jimbo, which was Cloud, which was Jimbo; Solaris, which was Ray; and Schnur, which was Wax. As we got through, we really didn't have a battle map for the first half, because this was all supposed to just be character design, kind of getting ideas for these characters together, and getting a little bit of role play practice in. And we did. There was so much that was done in that session as far as character development. Um, And so yeah, it was awesome. Everybody got in, started introducing their characters. We got rolling, and then we kicked off right with the breakdown, or right with the introductions for actually getting into the D&D. And we circled in with Savage. We went with Vero, who started in some field far away. He had a letter that he had tucked into his pocket, and he folded it up very safely, making sure it didn't fall out. We seen him pick up his tent and make sure it looked as if it was completely untouched before leaving his campsite. We got height and weight description Vero being 6.5 feet tall and weighing 225 to 230 pounds. And yeah, so he picked everything up and took off. Um, and then he began walking with the note, grabbing a whole bunch of dead wood and just different stuff that he could scavenge and find. Uh, Decent amount. He looked around, found rocks, made a little fire pit. Started off by making a fire and setting up camp somewhere else. So it was a pretty interesting intro for Vero, as we kind of just seen him being a wanderer, being this lone rogue nomad, and I guess that really kind of was cool later down the line, because we got to see him like sharing his food and having these reflective moments of this team helping him get through the process faster and faster and easier. So that was really cool opening here. Getting to see Pharaoh go from campsite to campsite, collecting more things such as plants, mushrooms, and insects. There was lots of insects nearby. Blunt says you feel comfortable. There's so many insects nearby. I don't know if that's how I described it, but and then and then it was a comfortable night, and then we went over to Solaris, who was uh, dreaming of basking in the sun, daydreaming of basking in the sunlight. Though it was latent night time, and there's all kinds of animals around. We got a description of her, her orange eyes, long purple hair, this forest clearing around her, and the little hut that she comes from, all of her animal friends, and she was stirring some brew, making something. She has a small garden patch that she tends to, takes care of, and she has a bow that she hunts with. Yeah, classic ranger, but she's also a wizard. An awesome introduction to her character. I really did like the breakdown. There was lots of animals that were described here. Some of the most notable ones were, there was a large rabbit that looked like the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. Um, there was a pair of foxes and some pixies. A lot of notable creatures. Uh, as she's cooking, the another pixie comes running up, and this is where we got kind of one of our uh, most famous clips right now for the Spells and Scepters series. This is actually a really good one, and one that I just finished animating, and that's when oh, little Timmy the pixie comes up and he's like, "Oh, Solaris, Solaris!" And Solaris went and helped him. Um, with his sister, who is sick, and she investigated and all kinds of stuff, and then she prepared and set out as well. As she was getting prepared and stuff, the little pixie tried to remind her that the only place that the sun petal bloom grows is in the forest of doom, and it gives gives her like a little background story. Um, and Solaris is basically undeterred. She's like, "Oh yeah, let's get it. Forest of Doom, gotcha." And yeah, got her gear together. She's been basically waiting her whole life for an adventure like this. So she took off and was ready to hit it. Um, and then we switched over to Jimbo and Schnur. And it was a bright moonlit night. So bright, but still, even though most of the stars could not be seen glowing softly behind it, there was four in the shape of a diamond, glowing brightly, slightly highlighting the sky right in front of Jimbo's eyes. And as he fluttered awake from the state in which he had been in and these things that he had seen in this vision of his moon heritage, we got a awesome description of him with his pale skin, which was light purple, gray eyes, about average of 6 feet, not skinny but not heavy set, and he is a moderately young age chill dude. And his eyes came fluttering open to see Schnur, who was up on his shoulder. And then we got the description for Schnur. And she's about a foot tall, blue hair, vibrant wings, little fairy, or little fae. And then we got some awesome dialogue back and forth between them. I really don't know how she was able to type this as they were talking back and forth, but yeah, it's just fantastic. We might have to literally post these up somewhere sometimes so that other people can come back and read through these. These transcripts are just fantastic. But yeah, they were actually the closest to the forest. We broke it down and did the math one time, so I don't want to re-say things now and get them wrong. But I believe they were about 2 days away from the forest originally. They had been everybody had been traveling for the same amount of time. However, Jimbo and Schnur were essentially 3 days closer. They got lost in the woods and were wandering around for an entire day for sure that they know of, but still lose track of 2 days entirely. It took them 2 days to get to the forest. They were lost in the forest for 1 day. That leaves 2 days of gameplay session where we don't know why they weren't at the forest. This is one of the biggest mysteries of the series right now, is what actually happened in those 2 days. Because quite literally nothing. From our point in perspective up into the story, all we had known was that everybody gets the same exact amount of time to travel, and that essentially they were the closest, starting out only 2 days away. They should have been there and been done and been gone, basically, by the time anyone else would have had the time to get there. And instead, they get lost for a day and are essentially there at the same exact time that everybody else gets there, which means that they've been traveling for 5 days. So that's really interesting to note. That yeah, they essentially could see this forest from his visions, just about 2 days away. They've been some other really interesting notes. They've been traveling together for about 4 years now, Jimbo and Schnur. And then we get a really cool, basically day vision. Like, he's not meditating, he's awake, he's with Schnur. This fog starts rolling in. There's like a wall of mist that's shining down from the moon that's protecting him from this fog. And he gets to basically bring Schnur with him into one of these visions, which is really cool setup for lore down the line. But yeah, so we get this really cool vision of the two sisters that Solaris was seeing, and we get to see Jimbo is basically having some sort of connection to them as well, and able to bring Schnur into the vision as it's basically happening while he's not meditating. It's just happening around him. Really, really cool setup there. And then as all that was happening, we get this full breakdown between Schnur and Jimbo back and forth role playing out. Then it finally transitions back over to Vero, and we get to see what his dream was. And he's having this really, really cool dream essentially feeling very cozy at home. He is actually literally figuratively or literally at home in his dream. And his mother's there bringing him these cheapened bread pies. Um, and uh, in the background, there was this shadow figure lunging around that was essentially trying to cause chaos. Maybe we don't really know what was going on with it, but it was just taking up the majority of his attention as he was trying to uh, figure out why he was having this dream. This lunging figure just kept striking out, just kept appearing before there was a loud roar, which essentially transitioned the dream to all these colors of entropy that were bending and warping around each other until we lost the dream entirely and then didn't get any more details before it just comes to an end. Um, a very awesome sequence. So that was one of my favorite dream scenes. And then it went back to Ray, who is still traveling, and she was probably traveling the fastest. Her and Jimbo, or her and Vero, were essentially the same distance away, so she was hauling. Um, Not really resting at all. We've seen many more stops from Vero. Uh, but she was just going the whole time. Maybe not like I meant I said fastest, but I meant she was just the most consistent using movement. The only place that she did consider stopping upon investigation turns out that was like a super terrible spot to try and stop to try and make camp. And would have probably died there, and instead just decided to keep pushing, and because of that just ended up being so consistent through the entire traveling. That was basically all she was doing. Even pushed her body like to its farthest extents. um and then after she had pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, she had very quickly worn herself out, and slightly off the path she had wandered before dodging to duck under a stick and coming up again, face planting into a tent, just absolutely devastating Savage's tent setup, and giving us another character introduction as they were able to meet and have a role play scene and get these vignettes for their characters to kind of lay some background as they were introducing each other. And they went in and started cooking and started making food, and had this nice camp scene where everything just kind of felt like it had settled down for a second. It was so early on for things to be settling down and for it to be already getting ready to be at that point where it was like, oh shit, we're gonna wrap it up. Um, but it was just so perfect. Like you couldn't reshoot it, you couldn't do it again. They got in there, they got their characters' ideas recovered. Who is this character? What do they stand for? Why are they out here? And now they're together right here looking at the Forest of Doom. And they agreed that it was probably best to go together. As Solaris was pretty determined, she was like, "Yeah, I'm like going in there. I gotta go and get this flower to save my friend." And Vero's like, seeing how clumsy she was just out here, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna die in there," and decides to go with her as he needed to go in there too. And yeah, so they both proceeded inside, and after about some time, we switched over, in which it came back around to Jimbo and Schnur, who had tracked and came all the way up upon the path of Vero and Solaris, as they were basically just wandering around in this forest, lost for a time. Um, and then we get their intro, which is throwing a turkey uh, forward at Vero and Solaris from behind as they were like sitting making their camp, and this turkey just lunges into the scene, and that gave us our intro to Jimbo and Schnur as they joined up with the party, joined in on some food, helped pack up the camp, and then all of them together headed even deeper into the forest where they were, well, and that we got into in another episode, but yeah, and then that we got into in another episode. But yeah, that was episode 0, The Whispers Before the Beginning. Again, a very, very well done and amazing transcript by Schnur and Jimbo here, our team note takers. They're very awesome. I would love to make these guys public for you all at home to be able to read at some point, because this is just so phenomenal. I wanted to go through on one of these podcasts and read through these, and there's no better one to start with than the very beginning. Episode 0, Whispers Before the Beginning. And as we were able to go in and kind of redo this episode, I just want to keep in mind the things that we were able to cover by having this transcript and by able to go in and recovering it. We got all of the lore that you guys get in the first couple pages of the module now set down for the podcast listeners and for those at home. You guys are now able to take this information and apply it to what we know about the characters, what we know about Heimdall, what we know about Silith, what we know about Father Tallius and trying to get new recruits to the Mistvale Sanctum. Why Mistvale Sanctum would be so protected. Why the continent seems like there's all these different factions that are going on and trying to basically assert their rule and assert their way of living and their ideas upon the rest. And why the whole continent in general seems like it's in this state of discourse trying to um, figure out which faction's going to come out on top, essentially. And that is going to be our biggest question going forward, as we find out Mistvale is the neutral. They don't care about coming out on top. Their whole thing is just making sure you're protected and safe as you learn to channel magic, as you learn what magic is, so that you can make those decisions. And I think that's another thing that makes the this module so special, and this whole game in particular, because it is not like anything out there. This is something that, as we're gonna go on to find, is heavily defined by what the players decide to make it out to be. This setting is meant to be a power grab for whoever rises up to claim it, yet maybe it is meant to not be so openly easy to contest, as if one were to rise up, would the faction that rise up against them not be the strongest faction? Um, and so it's really up to the players as to which factions succeed and which ones fall, which ones they play into, which ones they don't, and which ones we kind of won't get to see for a little while. Definitely we won't get much out of the Legion for a long time until we get through the majority of the module and start thinking about what's coming next. Because the Legion are very, very scarce in the module itself. They play a huge part in the world and a massive part in the story, but we really, really don't get anything. Like, they are one of the least referenced things in the whole fucking module. Because they weren't originally here. Originally, originally it was like way more just good guys versus bad guys, and now we've added this Skyrim component to it where it's like, well, one of them are more like the Stormcloaks and the other are like the Empire. And that being that now we also have Mistvale is neutral. They're not necessarily the good guys. They're just neutral. Um, and it's up to the players to decide which of the other factions is the lesser of two evils, which ones to help, which ones to destroy. And yeah, we'll get to see a lot of that going forward, especially now that we're actually at Mistvale Sanctum. We'll get to see a lot of that going forward, but we won't get to see a lot of the Legion. So it's very interesting to think about. And I think in our next one, in episode 2, Into the Night Fin podcast, when we go in and break down a little bit of that, I think we're going to go in and talk about some of the monsters too. So that's pretty cool because it's going to play right off of what we rolled out here. And then that is going to be really sick going forward because I've been wanting to get into some of the nerdiness for a while. But we're going to figure out a little bit of extra about that sphere and some of the different things as we get there. Hopefully, those of you that are following along at home have caught up with us at least until episode 3, or a lot of this is not going to make sense. We plan to roll out one for each episode, but again, we needed to have a good amount there to start from before we started going and breaking things down. So we had to reshoot what we had. We kept in to some of the later episodes, but unfortunately, we lost the original podcast for this episode, so we had to reshoot it. And that's what we're here doing now. So yeah, sometimes you just got to roll with it and catch you guys up in a bigger chunk, a bigger spectrum than episode by episode, scene by scene. Instead, catching up a overall summary, giving you guys all the lore of the world and all of the lore of episode 0 here. When we come back and talk about the episode 1 Into the Night Fin, we're going to talk about some really cool stuff: curses, monsters, the ecology of the monster, or biology of the monster, and the ecology of the environment of the world that these curses are grown in. Again, this is going to go into the veil and maintaining that order, the keystones, and that magical power that is prevalent in just letting these magic things be items, creatures, etc., etc. So we will get into a lot of that in the next episode 1's podcast, Into the Night Fin. But until then, I want to thank you guys all at home for joining with us as we got down and nerdy today. Broke into some crazy lore from left to right, side of the transcript here. We went all the way back. I mean, all the way back. This was some stuff that I don't even think a lot of the players have got information to yet, because the module hasn't even been released. We've just been testing, so nobody's got to actually crack it open and see the first starting pages that flow, and no one's got to read these things. So this is your guys' first look, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Thank you guys again for tuning in with us. We are going to be back here in a bit with episode 1. Make sure you guys hit that follow button. Go and check out the official series over on Spotify, Spells and Scepters. And until the next one, stay weird, stay wild, and keep them spells prepared.